Good afternoon. Well, good evening now, rather. Thank you all. Welcome to KSR Fans Play Star Trek Online, and this is going to be a bit of a different episode here. I'm going to transition to my screen there. Here. I need to minimize this into infinity nonsense here, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to be reviewing Markiplier's video. And give me just a moment here. I want to make sure that everything's coming out right. All right. So, I promised that I would get everything in order for this, and I'm going to review Markiplier's response to the George Floyd death, and I'm going to be pausing it here and there to kind of, get a sense of what's going on.
Know about a few.
Nope. Boy, boy, I should screenshot that. That just looks like Markiplier to a T right there. Okay. All right. So, get that ready here in just a moment. And protest unrest continues in Los Angeles 1 week after. All right. So I hate these off-the-cuff shows like this, where I got to show my desktop and everything else other than this. But all right, so I'm going to play this. I'm going to pause it here and there where I feel that it's appropriate, and I'll give my own comments. But this is Markiplier and his official response to the George Floyd murder.
Today I'm going to be talking about a very serious subject that you probably already know about. A few days ago, a man by the name of George Floyd was murdered by a police officer while he was placed under arrest. The circumstances of his arrest are irrelevant. The man is dead.
Okay. The circumstances of his arrest are still very relevant because there was a reason he was being detained after all. So the whole idea was that, he was a suspected check forger, and that's why the police were being called. So it is relevant, Mark. Sorry, Mark, but you're wrong on that.
Dead. And this sort of situation disproportionately affects a certain percentage of the population. George Floyd was an African American man, and there's a long storied history of African American men and women being murdered or abused while being placed under arrest. This is
okay. Again, let's call. Okay. All right. Police brutality in the United States according to Britannica.com. Yeah, I'll continue to the site. Okay. African Americans and police brutality. Americans of all races, ethnicities, ages, classes, and genders have been subjected to police brutality. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, for example, poor and working class whites expressed frustration over discriminatory policy in northern cities. At about the same time, Jewish and other immigrants from Southern and Eastern Europe also complained of police brutality against their communities. In the 1920s, many urban police departments, especially in large cities such as New York and Chicago, used extra-legal tactics against members of Italian immigrant communities in efforts to crack down on organized crime. In 1943, officers of the Los Angeles Police Department were complicit in attacks on Mexican Americans by U.S. servicemen during the so-called Zoot Suit riots, reflecting the department's history of hostility towards Hispanics and Latinos. Regular harassment of homosexuals and transgender persons by police in New York City culminated in 1969 in the Stonewall riots, which were triggered by a police raid on a gay bar. The protests marked the beginning of a new era of militancy in the international gay rights movement. And in the aftermath of the 2001 September 11th attacks, Muslim Americans began to voice complaints about police brutality, including harassment and racial profiling. So Mark is trying to say that racism only exists towards African Americans, and that kind of dull, kind of stupid look on his face kind of expresses exactly this. But yeah, let's continue with this video.
This has resulted in numerous demonstrations, protests, and riots that have occurred across the country.
Yes, numerous protests, demonstrations, and riots that will never bring George Floyd back to life, no matter what they do.
And centralized in Minneapolis. And I think, I hate the term I think.
Yeah, you hate the term I think because you think that what you're doing is,
Last thing I want to do is to try to inject my opinion into a situation that neither deserves it or needs it.
Oh, you're right. Your opinion is neither needed nor deserved.
But I think that this is a very human reaction to systemic injustice and racism that has been pervading our country for the past 50, 100, 200 years.
Okay. Again, I pointed out that George Floyd and Derek Chauvin worked together in the same nightclub in Minneapolis. There is much more to George Floyd's murder than just a bad cop killing a black person being detained. There's much more to this. And I think Mark is deliberately overlooking this because he wants to focus on the larger picture of racism in our country, which is a problem, but racism doesn't exactly cure itself when you have riots and you have demonstrations and people throwing bricks through windows.
This is a problem that is deeply rooted in our government and in our communities and in the systems that are supposed to help our fellow man. And it is a problem that needs to be rooted out at every turn. And
it's also a problem with corporations that you work for, like Disney. In fact, let's bring up, yeah. So yeah, I mean, let's call it what it is. Mark works for Disney, all right? So Disney's basically paying him to post this YouTube video so that, he'll get his 0.04 cents or whatever. But Disney itself has a long history of racism itself. Disney has acknowledged that their movies like Song of the South are completely racist. And they even warn now on the Disney Plus app about outdated cultural depictions. So, but yeah, you can't address racism without addressing racism in the company that you work for, Mark. And Walt Disney was an ardent supporter of the American Nazi Party right up until Pearl Harbor, when it was not fashionable to be a Nazi anymore.
And it's always been a big point of mine to try to use my platform responsibly to
Use your platform responsibly. Use it responsibly by staying out of business that you don't necessarily understand.
use my platform to steer people in the direction that I feel is right. In this case,
Again, you're feeling that something is right when you have no idea about what the real situation is with George Floyd and Derek Chauvin. You haven't even bothered to do the research like I did, Mark.
there is very little gray area to debate about. A man is dead.
Very little gray area to debate about. Yes, well, a man is dead, but why? Why is he dead? And it's not just because he had a neck, his neck compressed by a knee for 8.5 minutes. He's dead because Derek Chauvin felt threatened by him. Not just threatened in that one little detainment moment. He felt threatened by him at that nightclub that they worked at.
As a result of police brutality. And there was
No, it's not police brutality. This is first-degree murder. This is premeditated murder. Derek Chauvin made a point to be there on the scene to answer that call.
no justice in his death. And this
No, you're right. There is no justice in his death. You're right about that, Mark.
happens over and over and over again. And it's very easy to remove yourself from the situation, to think that it is so far removed from your life that it will never affect you. But this affects all of us. This is something.
It affects all of us when we have bad cops out there who are willing to break the law. It definitely affects us. But it doesn't affect us when you have people like Markiplier and me. I'll admit it. I'm being an asshole too about this. When you have people like us injecting our own opinions about this isn't helping the situation at all.
Something that is definitive of who we are as a people, who we will be for the future generations. I've always said that I want to leave the world a better place than I found it.
Oh, everybody says that, that they want to leave the world a better place when they found it. Be realistic, Mark. You just want to make sure that you leave a world where you don't leave as much trash behind as you did when you were born into it.
When I'm gone, I want the future generations to be able to enjoy peace and prosperity. I want that. But right now, we need to fight these injustices at every turn, because prejudice.
Okay, fight injustices at every turn. What does he mean by fight? How fight exactly? How do we write letters to our congressmen? Do we demand justice by, storming police buildings?
And injustice and racism runs very deep, and its roots are very thick. And if you don't cut it out, and if you don't stop it at every turn, it will always come back. And I think that the discontent is a result of that anger, of the deep-seated anger.
The deep-seated anger. The deep-seated anger is that people have been in quarantine for 2.5 months, locked in their homes because of a flu virus. Okay? People are angry that they can't go out and do things. And now finally, when they can, this asshole cop murders his friend from the club, everybody mistakes it as police brutality, and the world explodes in violence.
Of continually and repeatedly being ignored. Martin Luther King once said that riots are the language of the unheard, which means that.
No. All right, wait a minute. And it's Martin Luther King Jr., by the way, Mark. Martin Luther King Jr. His father didn't say it. Jr. said it. He also said injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, We must not allow our creative protest to degenerate into physical violence. Every man of humane convictions must decide on the protest that best suits his convictions, but we must all protest.
That when people are ignored for so long, they only have so many options to express.
Oh, so you're saying that people had no choice but to riot and to, throw bricks into buildings. Bullshit, Mark. Bullshit.
Their rage. And if there are problems that continually crop up and lead to these situations where justice is not served, then we need to change the systems that.
Okay, that's why police departments have a civilian review board to review incidents like this and determine if punishment is needed.
Allow that injustice to happen in the first place. And that is a long process that needs continual pressure and constant support and constant vigilance. I hope that we can live in a world where racism and prejudice are in the past, but the realist in me knows that we need to fight it at every turn, and we need to confront it, and we need to challenge it, and we need to defeat it.
Again, this isn't a racist attack. This was first-degree murder between two people who worked at the same club. And I don't get why everybody seems to think that the larger issue is race. This would have been murder if the other guy was white. This would have been murder and nobody would be rioting right now. The only reason we're rioting is because the media is telling us that this is supposed to be riot-worthy.
Whenever it rises up. In the description, I'm going to leave a link to a charity, an organization called Campaign Zero. They are dedicated to ending police violence in America, or at the very least, ensure that justice is always served when it is due. I will be
all this just to spam a website.
Making a contribution to this charity, and I encourage you to do the same or contribute to many of the other causes that people are linking on social media, on Twitter, on various other sites, or other YouTube videos. There are many ways that you can help, even at the most basic of just letting people know that this is not okay.
No, it's not okay, but again, this is not a racial issue. This is a first-degree murder issue between two people who worked at the same place of employment, who happen to know each other.
That we do not stand for this. Making your voice heard. You can make a contribution to a charity, or you can spread the message about it.
Or I can make a video on YouTube calling out your bullshit, Mark.
Demand change be made from it. We are all in this together, whether we like it or not. We're all part of the same country. We're all part of the same world.
Notice that tone that he takes, with you, like he's the scolding parent. Of course we're all part of the same world. But I have a feeling that if aliens were to come down upon us and visit us in first contact or whatever, that it won't necessarily end racism. We'll just find a new way to express it. We'll stop racism against humans, of course, but it'll be like the, tranatoids or whatever. We'll hate the bug people.
And we need to start looking out for each other. Black lives matter. And right now, we need to fight this injustice.
That was a mighty nice opinion that Markiplier put out there. Didn't address anything about the actual facts of the case. Just expressed his opinion that racism is bad. Well, racism is bad, and it's been going on for a long time. But this is a police murder. This is a murder disguised to look like racism. I hate these kinds of things because it just gets me so riled up for the... You know what? I'm just going to have to end this stream right now because I'm far too mad to play any video games. And I'm just amazed at how short-sighted some people are, that they can't see the larger picture, that they can't look at the details and they can't analyze it. They have to look at this whole problem like an elephant under a microscope kind of thing. But I'm going to call it a video here, and I'm going to edit the title. I may have to mark it private. I don't give a shit. But yeah, thank you all for watching me rant for a little bit, and I'll see you all later.